Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. It's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is Friday, August 16th, 2024. We're healthy, we're wealthy, we're whole, we're free. That's the mantra, of the Inspired live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in on X, Rumble, and YouTube, and in the live chat. I see y'all are already, chatting and talking, and Ronnie's here today. She's going to be our moderator today. Thank you so much, Ronnie. Christine's not here today with us, so I'm going to try a little later on. Keep an eye on the live chat towards the end. But thank you all for tuning in. I see Claudia, Lady on the Lake, Krista, Krista Labella. I see Dagda. Good to see you. Randy, Bob, Kathy, Night Vision, Reese. Of course, Big Gas. Good to see you, my friend. Andrea's here. CJ is here. I think I saw Jim a little up there. Erica is here. Good to see you. BG Raymond is here. Hello, my friend. Welcome, everybody. All righty. Well, this is going to be one of those shows where people are going to come afterwards and say, "Oh my God, you're fear mongering and whatnot." But hey, let's just stick to the facts and the truth here. And I'm going to start with the buried lead. Leave the damn cities. Leave the city as soon as you can. Over the last few months, I've visited a few fairly big cities in the United States, just been traveling, and that's where you land, and sometimes that's where you spend a day. And I can tell you that never in my life have I been as repelled and as quickly on my way out as I possibly could be. And this is in addition to, that's just my personal observation, in addition to all the stats and all the signs and everything that we're getting that clearly tells us on all levels, and I'm going to get into that with you today, on all levels, that society, civilization as we know it, is collapsing. Now, in my book, and this is why I lead always like that, that's a good thing. Civilization as we know it has been detrimental to us, has been deadly to us, has been enslaving us. So I welcome it. However, just because I welcome it doesn't mean it's pleasant, doesn't mean that it is a smooth transition and that we're not going through extreme situations here. So this is the polarity of this time. This is the polarity of transformation. Everything that happens in the world as a trend happens exponentially more intensely in cities. It's logical. Think about it. Look at New York City, an island much of it an island where 8 million people are living in absolute density with each other. And so all kinds of problems that arise everywhere in the world are only exponentially bigger there. Now, the thing is currently that getting to accurate statistics is almost impossible because they're hiding it, because they don't want to show how bad it really is. But the stuff that you do find is absolutely crazy. What we've seen in the intro trailer is the drug and homelessness crisis. Um, it is literally a war zone in most cities that you go, and it's not just the big cities. We just came from Asheville, North Carolina, and we were absolutely blown away by the amount of homeless people, drug addicted people, and no desire to spend much time in the city. And that's a general theme. But let's look a little bit as to what the problems are. What I think is what we're entering, we're going to talk about it more, what we're entering now, very, very shortly. Um, I think we're in an artificial economic realm, and that's always what happens right before a crash. They keep the system on life support, and you can do it. There are instruments where you can keep it afloat for a while. What I do think is that we're going to sort of skip um we're gonna I think skip the downturn and go into or the recession and go into a depression very, very quickly. And I think the signs have been there for people that have been paying attention. The end of this economic and financial system is here. We're seeing this in worldwide movements. We're seeing this that the BRICS and even other nations, not just the BRICS nations, are moving away from the old system. Most nations already have CBDCs in place or are rolling them out, but it does not mean that that will somehow alleviate the economic crash that we're about to experience. And again, this is not something that I want to see. This is just something that all the data points that you can find show. So I think what's going to happen is, and what probably, if we can compare this to any previous period, at least for America, we probably have to look about 100 years back to 1929, the big crash of 29, and the depression afterwards. The huge difference is that in 1929, even among the city people, you had a certain level of survival knowledge. You had a completely different population, much more resilient, by the way, much healthier, stronger. You are looking at a completely, and not everybody, but on average, a completely lost population in the cities when it comes to any kind of self reliance, self sufficiency needs. So they don't possess any of those skills anymore. Usually didn't grow up like that, never learned that. So you have sort of like this perfect storm, and there are multiple factors that have been building up over the last years. And I want to say, let's say the last 10 years, probably longer than that, but especially the last 10 years. And this is a pressure buildup. We're going to go through these factors and talk a little deeper here. Hold on. I see Amy says, I'm a Mexico Beach girl looking close to there. What Mexico Beach? The one in Florida? Okay, let's look at this here. Here are some of the pressure buildup sort of topics that really we need to look at. Poverty is a huge one. This has been building up more and more and more, and even states like California that throw billions of dollars, apparently, at least that's what they say, towards the homelessness and poverty problem, are only they're experiencing only more of that every single day. Drug use, we have a unprecedented drug crisis that goes way beyond the 70s, 80s, 90s, and anything we've ever seen, of course, because of um, fentanyl and basically every drug being laced with it. Because of the open routes, you we had a short time period where the routes, especially across the southern border, were closed down, largely, not all of them, but largely closed down. We have now a completely open border that makes it so much easier to bring in everything, including, of course, human trafficking and child trafficking, and that crime is at a level that has never before been seen. And you know how many cities now and how many companies now have policies where they don't even, if you have shoplifters, and if it's under $600 or $800 or whatever, they don't even call the cops anymore. This is when companies, when big chain stores begin to set policies like that, you are in the midst of the collapse of civilization. That is literally, there's it's sort of a level of insanity that we can't even fathom. But in the cities, that is exponentially so. Of course, we have political tensions that have been increased over the last 10 years to a degree that we've never seen before. Not just, and this is not just America, by the way. It might be, some things in America might be extremer than in other countries, but the political tensions, the left-right divide, this game that's being played is so huge. And there is one side of this equation, and this might shift over history, but we have currently a extremely radicalized and unfortunately prone to violence extreme left. And again, I'm not playing this game at all. I'm just saying this is my observation. You can radicalize, and you've seen this during 2020. You've seen the BLM, these BLM protests and whatnot. That were not protests, that were extreme riots. And you see that this tendency to violence, looting, and destruction can be ignited at any point. Now, this is 2020. We're now 4 years later. A lot of bad things have happened in those 4 years, also within people, and we're going to talk about that too. Another thing that, of course, we already talked about is economic decline and disparity. So, what does that mean? So, an economic decline would suggest that the entire economy, sort of takes a nosedive, and everybody is affected, and that to a certain degree is true. But what is more troublesome is the disparity, and this is also something that has been building up over 100 years, right? So everybody's always said the rich become richer and the poor become poorer, and that is true. But the way that this happens mathematically in an economic system is that these two lines, if you will, let me see if I can do this for a moment here. So you have these two lines, and they sort of go parallel, if you will, and they go like this for a long period of time. So yes, and then you have a middle class that's kind of the buffer between the two. What has happened over the last years is the middle class is basically gone. So these two lines are almost touching, the poor and the rich, or were touching, and now this is going like this. So exponential. Poverty levels down to a degree never before seen, and then wealth levels of the one percenters, if you will, going up and shooting up because, but this is an economic, a mathematical thing. This is not something that has to do with a specific policy. That's how the monetary and the economic model were built, knowing that you could transfer real wealth, right? Land, buildings, real estate. You could transfer it over about 100-year period from the working from the working class to the capital class. So that's what's been happening. The real wealth of this nation and all other nations in this economic system has been transferred to an upper one or even less, a 0.5 or 0.1% quote unquote elite. And this isn't, you can't see this any more clearly than in the cities. Okay, let's look a little further here. Racial tensions. Now, I've just had this discussion with my dad the other day, and this is one of the biggest ones that's been pushed over the last years. I want to say that my perception of racial tensions from 10 years ago is um, actually much better than it is now. And I don't think it's because of real racial tensions. I think it's because of instigated, constantly pushing that subject. And again, in the city, this always becomes much more visible quicker because you have people living so closely together. Um, and so I think this has been pushed over the last years, and we can't seem to get to a peaceful point. I think that in the last years, the language has increased where you have constant racial description in every area of life. There's a black before, or a white before, or an African American, or an Asian American before every description of anything, which I think is completely stupid. And we're all human beings, and uh, to classify people based on the color of their skin is the greatest idiocy that there could be. But that's what's been done in the media. That's what's been done through entertainment and movies. And so we have these fake racial tensions that can be ignited at any point in time. And of course, when people get have drug problems or poverty problems, then it's so much easier to tell them where you're not at fault. Those people are at fault. Radicalization, this is literally what I just talked about. So that means that whatever tendency whatever tendency we've seen in society before, it has now been radicalized, increased, right? Whatever was bad 10 years ago is now worse in people, because every little label, every little group, every little box, stuff that people identify with. I'm this sports fan, I'm this political party, I'm this religion, I'm this race, I'm this gender, whatever. Those boxes have been clearer defined and radicalized. So people were being told why they need to um, be so harsh about it, and why they need to let everybody know who they are and what they stand for, and why they shouldn't accept if someone doesn't vibe with that. So now you see all these clashes, and you can't go on social media without seeing these interactions that happen between people where some dude who thinks he's a woman or whatever gets offended because not everybody sees it that way. So stuff like that, just radicalization all over the place. And by the way, my wonderful wife just walked in, so she might join us in a live chat here in a moment. Decline in morals, which I don't have to tell you that's unlike anything we've ever seen. And again, this there are sections carved out that I would say are better, and sections carved out that are worse. But cities, morals in cities are at an all-time low, to the degree where, as I said, if I don't have to, I don't go into a city. Really, if only if I have to, and I'm out of there as quickly as possible. I'm repelled. I'm disgusted. I can't even think of a city that I would like to visit right now. Decline in education. All over the world, the average levels of maybe not all over the world. Okay, let me say the countries that I've looked into, levels of education, and this is something that you and I might feel in conversation with people, but the levels of general education, and I'm not saying that the general education as we had it in the system is good, but to say the system is bad, let's not educate ourselves at all. That's even worse, right? So the problem that that creates is when you have a lack of education on all levels is that there is no level to meet people at. To know certain common truths is connecting people. Today we have ever smaller classes of thinkers and boxes of people that are so poorly educated that reading levels are extremely down. I mean, basic math levels are extremely down. I'm not even talking about emotional intelligence, which in the education system is usually non-existent. But all the previously mentioned factors actually play into that. When people have to fight to survive, when people are boxed into their radical little boxes, when people are distracted with all kinds of other things, then of course education plays a very small role. And you now have, and I have, unfortunately, I have these conversations every now and then with people that come from reputable colleges and universities that are complete idiots, to um, use Max Egan's words. They're just complete morons. They know nothing. and they have zero ability to critically think. How does this pertain to cities? Everything that is a problem in the world is a much bigger problem in a city. As I said, the density of things. So when you have people that can't critically think, have very little education, have no common sense, then you have, like, it's a powder keg. And that's what we see in the cities today. And that's why it is so easy to go and inflict something, start something, create a spark that might be artificial, and get hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people to riot, to loot, to go to extreme lengths, because they have lost so much of their innate abilities. And one of the things, and we'll get to that in the medical stuff. Um, yeah, I'll take it one step at a time. The rise in autocratic tendencies. What does that mean? Well, since the year 2020, we have seen sort of the willingness of governors, mayors, city councils, and everything in between to react in very autocratic, very almost monarch-like ways, where when they deem something to be a problem, they basically say, "Here's how we're going to do it," and everybody is forbidden from doing this, and throwing out mandates, and it started with lockdowns and mask mandates and all that. And we have seen that once this tendency begins to be lived, not just thought about or talked about, but lived, people don't go back. So whatever powers people in government are given, they never relinquish them again. That's a historic truth. Nobody ever gives back power. Nobody ever gives back rights. If people uh, allow for their rights to be taken, then they have been taken. They won't give them back. Now, how do you get those rights back? You need to embody them. That's first and foremost the thing. But these autocratic tendencies have gone up to, of course, the presidential, prime ministerial levels. We see this in Europe all over the place. Prime ministers, fantastic levels of power that they give themselves, and because that is unpopular with the people, you see a big turnaround in so many prime ministers and even presidents much faster than ever before. But they just swap out the faces and the names. The program, the policies remain the same. And these autocratic tendencies have a much stronger effect in the city. I'll tell you this: we live in a sort of more suburban area, and on the edges of that, closer, much closer, or much more to the country. So in these areas, such mandates are not really that big of a deal. There's community, people have more common sense, and we didn't really, there was a little bit of, in the first few weeks of 2020 when all that started. Yeah, there was some of that, but I haven't seen anybody enforce anything really. It was much more, you do you, I'll do me, and nobody was on each other's case much. So this doesn't work in the city. We've seen how crazy people went in the cities very quickly, and how they were supported, right, by the autocratic governments. Unprecedented mass immigration. Now, this is most definitely true for Europe. This is most definitely true for the United States and Canada. I would assume it might be similar in Australia in certain places, although it's probably a little diluted. But we have the complete and utter dilution of these cultures, American or European cultures. And you now have entire spots in cities, you have entire blocks, whatever you want to call them, districts, literally districts and cities, European cities, German, French, even in Vienna, where you don't see or hear a word spoken in a native language, where you think you've just entered a mostly a Muslim country, in some places it's an African country, and where you have literally lost that part of the city to a foreign culture. The problem is this didn't happen voluntarily. This didn't happen because people agreed on this. This didn't happen because people wanted to have little this or little that in their city. It happened because you had the floodgates opened, and this has been going on as a cultural tactic again for almost 100 years, but especially in the last few decades at a degree never before seen. It is a population replacement, it is a cultural replacement, and that is not a judgment call. I'm not saying this or that culture is better or worse. This is simply a colonization through another tactic. It's not by war. It's not by imperialism, where you sent your army to a foreign country and invaded and take over. This is a different kind of invasion, but it is an invasion nonetheless. And so the cities are, we see this in the UK now, but the cities are um, literally so close to massive, massive unrests, riots, and chaos, because that's what they've been cultivating. That's what they wanted. If you wanted to have migration or immigration into a country, into a city that serves everybody, then you make sure that people that come from different foreign cultures do not bond together in one place, in one district of a city, but you make sure that people have opportunities to move all over the place, which makes it much easier for them to assimilate, makes it much easier for the native, the culture, to absorb it. But of course, we've been in such cycles for hundreds and hundreds of years all over the world. And so this is the first time that cultural subversion and mass immigration has happened without major kinetic conflict. But this will very soon, because that's the plan, cause an explosion, a real huge tensions, and these tensions will have the deepest and strongest effect in the cities. You don't have to be a prophet for that. You just have to use common sense. This next point is one that worries me the most, because it's the biggest unknown. We know it's a factor, we just don't know how big of a factor it is, and that is medical and electromagnetic manipulation. So these are two areas that, by the way, work completely together, but we don't know just how powerful they are. So you know what I mean by medical manipulation. So when our physiology is altered through medical interventions, and I mean we're on the tail end of the biggest medical intervention in human history, at least known. Um, we all know what we talk about here. We simply don't know how extreme the effects could be. Now, let me remind you of the intro. And if you haven't watched it after the show's over, please watch the intro to this show. And you can go on any social media platform and watch hundreds and thousands of these videos where they film people that have taken certain drugs. And there's one word that comes to mind over and over again. These are zombies now. These people have been zombified. So what do these drugs do? How do they chemically alter people? How do they alter the brain? What do they erase? What do they kill? And what happens when certain parts of the brain are killed? What happens when certain parts of our DNA maybe even are activated, when certain or deactivated, and certain genes are deactivated? And there are genes that we have that allow us, from a physical perspective, to have spiritual connection. When you disable, and that's what they've studied how to do, when you disable those genes, that's when people lose not just their spiritual connection or their ability, but they lose empathy, they lose sympathy, they lose kindness, they become colder, they become more detached, they become less human, literally. And so many people have described that they've seen that in their family, in their relatives or loved ones, just a detachment from humanness. So when you have that, and then you combine it with studies that we've seen where I forget his name, but he wrote a book on it. His doctor, I think from Germany, that hippocampus activity, and I'll explain what the hippocampus is partially responsible for. Hippocampus activity has gone down over the last years at a never before seen rate. The hippocampus is responsible whenever you perceive new information. It is sort of like a data center that allows you to compare and contrast that new information with information that's already in your brain, categorize it, uh, analyze it, and sort of come to a conclusion. It's an entire process, right? When hippocampus activity goes down or it isn't capable of doing that, then you absorb information without this critical filter and without this process. So everything simply comes in and you don't discern truth from lies. And there's this incredibly important step that doesn't work any longer. And there are multiple reasons why it doesn't work. Our habits or society's habits, the scrolling habits, where we receive so much information so fast, right? When you scroll through these social media feeds and whatnot, and the hippocampus can't really critically analyze, and categorize this information. That drives the ability down. But there are biochemical factors in our environment, food, water, and medical stuff, and electromagnetic stuff that heavily impacts the hippocampus activity as well. So these are all wild cards, and it is um, a plethora of factors that all work together. So now you have a moral decline, an educational decline, then a decline in the ability to think, right? Uh, Pair this with a deactivation of the gene that allows us to have spiritual connection, and with biochemical and electromagnetic manipulation that seems to be able to turn people into something different than they are at a very quick pace. Maybe you could say it emphasizes their reptilian brain, uh, you know, a loss between the connection of the two hemisphere, the left and the right brain, which is so important. This connection, all of this is happening at an exponential level right now. So the medical manipulation, electromagnetic magnetic manipulation, I would say is the greatest wild card, because I think it gives those who initiated this the ability to, at the push of a button or the flip of a switch, initiate behavioral patterns and initiate programs and protocols within the body that we simply don't know what they will do or what they're capable of doing. So, why does this pertain to cities? Once again, if you're in a suburban area, if you're out in the country, rural, you're not as close to as many people. So, your ability to stay undisturbed or to stay more farther away is much easier. It's much greater than in the cities. In the cities, you can't do that. There's people all over the place. What are you going to do when 500,000 people receive a signal that does something to them that might be very harmful? I mean, I'm just saying these are all, we're in a time that is so strange where we have to discuss these things as present realities, not science fiction futures or even movie futures, but present realities. There's a few more factors. International tensions and wars. I mean, wars are always the hardest on, as always, on densely populated areas. These tensions are not going away. They don't want them to go away. We're going through the greatest restructuring of this realm in known history. So you can just expect that to increase and increase and increase. There's no decrease currently visible. And Central European countries and populations are absolutely, those who are even remotely awake and aware, are preparing for greater tensions, for an expansion of the war, into other countries and other conflict zones. They know it's going to have huge economic impacts. There's no doubt about that. Transhumanism, I mean, all of what I just talked about in a medical sense, transhumanism and transgenderism are really one subject, it just seemingly divided. Where transgenderism is simply one step closer to transhumanism. So first, you eliminate the reality of genders, and I'll say this to you once again. I just spent 3 days in the wilderness, gone from civilization with a small group of people. My son Noah was one of them, and we had to fend for ourselves. We didn't have much with us. It was a real survival thing. Very, very great experience. None of that shit matters out there and would have any bearing on your ability to survive. So you have to look at this entire 77 gender discussion as something that only happens in the matrix, in the artificial realm. It cannot happen in nature to that degree because there is no bearing. There's no basis in reality, and so it just doesn't happen there because there's no time for things like that, and it doesn't matter there either. But transgenderism is simply a step to dilute the family, as the strongest union within society has already been destroyed. So the next step is to destroy the last identification that we have with this physical reality, which is gender, what we were born as, man or woman. A tiny, tiny, tiny fraction, tiny, minute fraction of people is born different, not man, not woman, maybe something in between, but that's like, you know, marginal. Um, Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you. And so transhumanism is the step that we actually are being led to, where we accept that now the end of Homo sapiens as we know it, the end of human bodies as we know it, and the merger with AI, the merger with technology, the full on merger, and what they call the improvement, the erasure of all our mistakes, of the mistakes of evolution, all their bullshit. Um, that's what transhumanism is, and that is on the rise, and you can see it in the cities. That's where you see people with their implants scanning and with their palm payments and iris scan and all that crap, and implants, under the skin, which was the what everybody thought was the mark of the beast. But it's going to get much further than that, much quicker than that, and that's going to cause huge problems. Of course, once again, every problem in the world is much more concentrated in the city. Technocracy, which is the rule through basically no more elected governments, no more elected official, of the people, for the people, by the people, but experts that are appointed, experts that are appointed and that decide for society. Like, you won't have, in their view, a president, a mayor, a governor, all of that, but you will have someone like Dr. Fauci, who will be, as the expert, responsible for everything health related, and he will have a king-like standing in that. That is what technocracy is, as the rule by experts. But of course, it involves the word, or has the word, technology in it. So it's the rule by technology, maybe through these experts, if you will. But really, technocracy on the rise is an AI centric government style. And in the cities, that will look something like, it's everything is smart. By the way, look up the real definition of smart. Everything is smart, everything is connected. And so for you to enter any place, if you don't have an implant, you will at least have to scan a QR code everywhere you go in these urban areas. Once the collapse is through and they come up with the new systems, and unless you have that, which makes you completely see through, they will see everything about your health, everything about who you are, what you earn, where you live, what you do, what you think. That is the technocratic idea. Of course, we talked about manipulation through food, water, and air. Once again, much easier to have that in a city because there is no alternative. You can only eat what you buy in a store. There's no other place to go, no farmer's market. You don't get that piece of meat from the farmer down the road because there is no farmer down the road. And then what I just talked about, Agenda 2030, 15-minute cities, and that is the transitioning period that we're in. They want to ultimately, and here we go to the, and I've talked about this at length, but I will, because I know that the more you see it unfold, the clearer it becomes. But we will experience a collapse and a crisis unlike anything anyone has experienced before. Because, mainly because humans have become so incapable. That's the biggest problem. Times of crisis for a strong society, for a educated society, for a skilled society are, well, they're times of crisis. Okay, so times are tough. Well, we're going to pull through. We know what to do. We know how to do it. Times of crisis in a weak society is hell on earth. And I would say hell in the city. So what I see coming uh, is hell in the city. Well, hell has already arrived in the cities, but at a level that is going to be much bigger. So it isn't hard to see that this transformation won't happen without the collapse. It is a calculated collapse. It is a structured collapse because the most common way in history to change something significantly is to initiate a incredible crisis which causes a lot of suffering, and then you bring the solution and you're going to tell people we have the solution, accept it, and the suffering is over. That's how every damn huge change happens in history. But here is, and here we get to the positive end of things. There are people who have been disappearing. What do I mean by that? Well, there are wonderful people who first moved from, maybe apartment buildings to a house somewhere a little further away from city center, and then they moved into that first suburban neighborhood, and then they moved a little further out, and these people have been disappearing from mainstream society for the last years at never before seen levels. These are good people. They see what's happening. They have prepared their families. They've prepared themselves. They are restructuring their lives, and they're willing to completely change their lifestyles, like completely. Because for the last century, you could have your foot, each foot in one canoe. The urban comforts of society canoe, and the more self-sufficient, self-reliant canoe. You could live in both worlds. That is over. You can't live in both worlds, or at least very soon you won't be able to any longer. And so a lot of good people have been leaving the big cities, have been going to small towns, outskirts of small towns. These people are building communities. They're meeting regularly with others. They are exchanging knowledge, skills. They're even bartering a lot more. They are paying attention to what matters to them and their families and their small communities, and making sure that they're resilient and strong. They're changing their diets. There's a huge trend that people are quitting alcohol and all kinds of other drugs. So the upside of this is that um, you have this huge exit where people have left the corporate lifestyles, they have left the city lifestyles, and have returned much more to the basics. These are people that exist all over America, all over Europe, and probably all over other countries, and they are excited because this is happening now, but excited because they've already started to build new structures, new ways of looking at things, because they're much more resilient in their small communities. These are usually people that have deeper spiritual connection, that really want to live with the land, not on the land. And so this is a warning, and I'm not gonna pretend it's not. This is a warning. I don't think that there will be any kind of pleasant life in the city in the next years. I think this is over. It's already over. Maybe for the ultra rich, they can still have their small, tiny little bubble that functions But even that, I don't see it. That's why the ultra rich and the powerful have all built their little, escapes away from society. And the cities are gonna be hell. There might be the odd exception, don't get me wrong, but as a rule of thumb, please sit down with your family, take into consideration what I said, and do your own research on this. Look at the decline of your city. Look at the numbers that you can find: rise in homelessness, rise in crime, rise in suicide, rise in poverty, rise in drugs, rise in mass migration, rise in autocratic decisions, rise in ultra liberal, extreme left city governments that it's basically the Babylon with huge restrictions. All of those should be factors, but I would never live in a city for myself. But if I had children, I mean, I would move heaven and earth if necessary. If I had small children now, our children they're grown, but uh, this is a warning. Please, please, please look at your options. Do what you can with what you have where you are, and later on, when this initial big transformation, this collapse period is over, I think we can look at how we can actually create beautiful urban centers that serve the people, that are much more greener, that give opportunities and a beautiful place and space to live to everybody. So I think before the next period of time, cities are not the place to be. All right, my friends, thank you so much for tuning in for today's show. I also want to invite you over. We're going to do a Coffee and Truth live stream over in our locals community shortly. This is the locals community, is where there's no censorship. I can say all the words, like a freaking adult. And we appreciate, all our beautiful audience here on YouTube. But the guidelines here, how they work. But over there are none, and we speak completely freely. But also, it's more of an personal, intimate. Christine and I answer a lot of questions in the live shows. We go through the comments much more because there is a little less density, of course, too. And it is a beautiful community where people connect, they talk to each other, they build friendships. And so we just appreciate that. We kept the locals is a subscription platform, by the way, an uncensored, but we kept the subscription fee super low. So it's 19 cents a day. And at 19 cents a day, we also keep the trolls away. There are no bots, there are no trolls, no bullshit programs that tend to disrupt the conversation. So if you want to join us there, please go to inspired.locals.com or click the link in the description, and we will see you over there.
She has all the links I need.
Yes. So Ronnie, I said this at the beginning, but we just want to say Ronnie, we've added Ronnie, she's been with us since the beginning of Inspired. We've added Ronnie as a moderator here in a YouTube live chat, and you are just doing a wonderful, wonderful job. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing the links and inviting people and encouraging. And you're just a blessing, Ronnie. Thank you for joining the Inspired team in this way. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you. We love you. We appreciate you. And we will be back with you again very, very soon. Are you looking for like-minded and like-hearted people to connect with? Then the Inspired community on Locals is the right place for you. You can post, comment, share, and connect with others, and our shows there are completely uncensored and unfiltered. It's stuff we can't talk about here. It's such a great community, and there are zero trolls. We keep the subscription fee super low, so 19 cents per day. Keep the trolls away. Join us today at inspired.locals.com. We can't wait to see you there.